So we live our whole lives as a reflection of what we think other people think we should be when we don't even know what they think we should be, and we don't know what they think of us currently. And what's the greatest irony is that that formula leads to becoming a fake person.
Right.
Because you don't actually try to become self-aware, express who you truly are, become the greatest version of you. You're crippled by a sense of external chains of what other people want you to be. And more importantly, no one likes fake people. So they won't like you. And you won't like yourself.
Right, the irony.
What if you flip the whole script and you start becoming a genuine, real version of you who pursues the greatest actualization of becoming your true self, if there is, which, we should talk about it. Is there a concept of becoming your true self? Well, first of all, you stop caring what other people think.
Right.
Second of all, you start loving life. You start loving who you're becoming. You start falling in love with ideas and Torah and people and Hashem. And more importantly, that's the type of person people like. It's like, this is a classic question, like, how much do you dumb things down for kids?
Welcome back to another episode of the Jews Next Door. In this topic, we are exploring self-confidence. How can we as parents install our children with self-confidence? And we have the pleasure of sitting today with Rabbi Shmuel Reichman, who is the author of this incredible book. Strongly recommend, from Mosaic Press. You got to check it out. It is awesome. He's also the CEO of Self-Mastery Academy, and he lectures all over, and he lectures on business. He's a coach. He does it all. He's really incredible. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me.
So let's, first things first, we're talking about self-confidence. What is your definition of self-confidence? You like, when I see all your posts, you are like my definition of, like, you exude as self-confidence, which is incredible. What is your definition of self-confidence?
So it's a fascinating question. And I would say that self-confidence is essentially a combination of believing in yourself, believing in the value that you have in the sense of potential and at the current moment. Because the people who are the most confident are the people who are on a journey of becoming better. And most people think that confidence is when you've kind of hit it, when you're there, and they're kind of now sharing the finished result of their greatness with other people. They're great speakers, they're brilliant, good looking, wealthy, have great marriages, they're athletes, they're kind of like the best of the best. And most often the people who you think are the most confident have such like cripplingly low levels of self-confidence because they're so much better than you, but they think they're not good enough.
Interesting. They
think that they're not who they're supposed to be. They're so worried that they are not good enough for the people around them. They're afraid that they're not going to hold up to their standards, right? The people who you view as role models, first of all, they have role models. So they're also striving for something, and they think they're not there. So the moment that you realize that self-confidence is a spectrum of basically saying that I believe that everything until now, in the sense of my journey to get to where I am, has been worthwhile, and I've come so far. So you get to appreciate how far you've come, but that you give yourself permission to also enjoy the journey of becoming more. And you're comfortable in that flux, like in that transition. Like most people, either they're never good enough for themselves, or they've kind of bought into the lie that they're perfect the way they are. And that's where they get their confidence from. It's like, I'm perfect. I'm brilliant. I'm literally God's gift to the universe at this current moment, and there's nowhere for me to go.
Right. So you're saying essentially it's a growth mindset.
It's a growth mindset that comes from synthesizing past, present, and future. Of, as long as I'm on the journey of becoming the best I can be completely present and comfortable and confident and excited about who I am now, while always striving to be more. And then confidence is essentially self-belief. It's belief in yourself. And let's talk about the lack. You can kind of understand most things by its contrast. Like the Maharal talks about, everything can be clarified by its contrast. So people who are not confident, like, how would you describe them?
Someone who doesn't believe in themselves.
They're afraid of sharing their voice.
Yeah, sure.
Afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged, afraid of failing, afraid that they're not good enough, afraid that, like, maybe their potential isn't even that good, and maybe their best is behind them, and maybe their best wasn't even good to begin with.
Right. What are others going to think? And always thinking, right.
It's like Seinfeld was famous for saying that they've done studies that the biggest fear in the world is public speaking. And the second biggest fear is death,
Right.
which means that most people, if there's a funeral, would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. Right? It's like, but why? Why are people so scared of public speaking? Because when you public speak, the spotlight's on you and everyone sees you. And you're the center of attention, and they get to basically see who you actually are, what you think, what's on your mind, what you believe, how you express it. And if you don't believe that what you have is worth sharing, then why would they believe it?
Interesting.
So it's the most vulnerable expression of self.
Yeah.
And every creative form of self is the same thing as public speaking, writing, having a real conversation, sharing what you actually believe, actually pursuing what you feel like your life is supposed to be about. It's just a form of trying to actually share that kind of inner sense of potential self out into the world. And most people are very scared that they shouldn't, that's not that good, that they don't know what they're talking about, that they
I mean, you're saying like if they're vulnerable, if they don't believe in it, then they're not going to be vulnerable. They're not going to want to be vulnerable. Right.
That's why it's interesting, because there is false confidence. There's believing that you are something that you're not.
Right.
So that's just being out of touch with reality. That's why being objective and self-aware is the most important thing for confidence. And there is the fake it till you make it concept, which is you don't, for example, you don't teach someone how to play piano by teaching them incorrectly and then teaching them correctly. You just try to do it correctly and walk into it.
Eventually you'll get into it.
You don't try to lift the weight by not lifting the weight and hoping one day you will. You need to figure out exactly like one level above where you currently are, but you push yourself into the version of yourself you know you're supposed to become. But there are people who think, going like, there are televised singing contests where people come on, they think they're the best singer in the world, and they're awful. And talking about parenting, sometimes their parents will tell them like, oh, you're amazing. And they wind up going their whole life thinking they're amazing, and they're awful. It's not a service to them. It's also like, it's a disservice, but they're out of touch with reality. So getting that sense of being in touch with your skill set, with your talents, with who you are, and then having the confidence to be vulnerable. And there's like, most people, if they're vulnerable, they'll usually get hurt. And if they get hurt, they will no longer be vulnerable. So let's say you're dating and you open up, you share something that you've never shared with anyone else, or you would never share with anyone who's other than your best friend. And they give you like that look and they kind of judge you.
Right. And then you're like, I will never share again.
I'm never going to share. Again, I'm not going to share anything with you. Ever again. I'm not going to share anything with anyone again. And they build these walls to protect themselves. Because if I lower the wall and someone stabs me, even not intentionally, it's just that maybe I didn't know how to share it. Maybe I did it too soon. Maybe I trusted the wrong person. And they think everyone in the world's like that. And they think that the only way to survive is to kind of build up that kind of very firm exterior. And they're not real anymore because they're afraid of being real.
Interesting.
And then there are people who are way too vulnerable because they're kind of like also out of touch. Like they share way too many things way too often, with way too many people way too soon. There's like kind of not building a channel of connection with people. And then there are people who are vulnerable, but they also have a shield, which means that they've gotten to the point where they're not going to share too much too soon with too many people. But even if someone does judge them, it doesn't hurt them because they have an infinite sense of self-belief to the point that they're not getting their self-worth from someone else. Because a lot of people, they're kind of, that vulnerable throw is like, I'm going to throw a piece of myself out there. If you catch it, like, oh my gosh, thank God, I thought you were never going to like trust me. But like, if you don't, I'm shattered. And that's normal because that's how you build just a sense of like, what can I share with people? Like, how do I do it? You're going to make mistakes. But the people who their sense of self-worth is internal, as in, I'm devoting my life to becoming all that I can be. I'm going to try to actualize my potential. I'm getting my self-worth by feeling like I'm on the journey of progress of becoming me. And what other people think of me doesn't really matter that much. It's like, when I was in high school, I kind of came to this realization, and like a lot, like when I was in high school, it's like you wear certain clothes to fit in, you talk a certain way to fit in, you kind of like, it's like, why? Because there's this idea that if other people like me, I'll like me.
This was me in high school too.
Right? It's crazy. But what happens? We end up all putting on an act because we want people to like us. So we try to become the people that we think they like. So we end up becoming a reflection of what we think.
Right. We're not our true selves. It's not really us. It's who we think that other people will like. And we put ourselves into that box in order to be liked. And
I know it's crazy.
Like this never ending cycle. The
paradox is that number one, we don't know what they want. So there's like this kind of like, we're just throwing things, we're trying.
Right.
Number two is that you'll never really know what other people think of you. All right. When was the last time someone said, I think, you're A, B, C, and D? It's like, we're just kind of like ruminating on what we think other people perceive us to be. So we live our whole lives as a reflection of what we think other people think we should be when we don't even know what they think we should be. And we don't know what they think of us currently. And what's the greatest irony is that that formula leads to becoming a fake person.
Right.
Because you don't actually try to become self-aware, express who you truly are, become the greatest version of you. You're crippled by a sense of external chains of what other people want you to be. And more importantly, no one likes fake people. So they won't like you. And you won't like yourself.
Right. The irony.
What if you flip the whole script? And you start becoming a genuine, real version of you who pursues the greatest actualization of becoming your true self, if there is, which, we should talk about it. Is there a concept of becoming your true self? Well, first of all, you stop caring what other people think.
Right.
Second of all, you start loving life. You start loving who you're becoming. You start falling in love with ideas and Torah and people and Hashem. And more importantly, that's the type of person people like. It's like, this is a classic question, like, how much do you dumb things down for kids? And in the truest form, the essence of wisdom is you don't lie. You take the same truth and you make it children size.
Right.
And that's hard.
Yeah, especially for people who are, I know we were talking about this before we started recording, that the concept of like, being a Jewish educator and, but for people who are not a Jewish educator and don't know how to take that and package it differently, it's a hard thing to do.
That's the idealism of life, is that you start realizing that a lot of people, that's why parenting is hard, because parenting is nothing other than the expression of yourself, and life is hard. And most people struggle with an identity of, I am not a leader, I'm not an educator, I'm not great, what if I'm not confident? How am I going to help my kids be confident? What if I'm not learning? How am I going to help my kids learn? What if I'm not disciplined? How am I going to help my kids be disciplined? What if I don't have a good relationship? How am I going to? So yeah, that's the ultimate responsibility of you need to get your act together, because life is the most incredible journey of all time, but it's not designed to be easy. It's designed to be meaningful, and it's designed to be the ultimate embracing of responsibility. We've kind of overgeneralized how bad the generation has gone, how bad teenagers are, how bad. Like, I'll give you an example, just to switch into divrei chol. We live in the 15-second clip generation. No, we don't. Right? People sit down for 3 hours to listen to podcasts, and if you see what we can name, if you look at the top podcasts on Spotify, right? The top ones, 2-3 hours with the most interesting people, and your classic uneducated people are listening to them. Why? It's because people do want tochen, they want content, they want depth, they want wisdom, and they feel like they're just
that. But who's listening to podcasts? Not kids. Most kids are not listening to podcasts. I know there is like some kids podcasts, 100%. For the most part, it's adults. Adults have matured to a process where
a lot of adults treat kids like kids when kids are small adults. Like at a certain stage, teenagers, they want freedom. They want to find themselves. They want to essentially go out and to spread their wings. And if you look at high school curriculums, like, are we teaching high school kids how to build their identity, build their confidence, how to essentially strive for greatness, develop their skill sets, build their fundamental drive to go on the journey of becoming the great people that they look up to? No, we're just basically throwing information down their throats, having them memorize and spit back. When you treat them like someone who's capable of something great, and you actually help them aspire to what they want to aspire to, as opposed to holding back. I mean, this is a very, 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 very deep concept. It's a very deep discussion, because what's the purpose of education? The purpose of education comes from a Latin word which means to bring out. Mm-hmm. That's not what the education system is designed for.
Right.
The education system is designed to prepare them to get a job.
Yeah.
And like, I've gone to a lot of schools, right? I'll have a lot of degrees. 99.99999% of what I learned came outside the classroom. Because the classroom 100%. Is not designed to self-actualize. It's designed to essentially categorize into can or can't in the classic memorization skill sets necessary to essentially bridge people into who's going to be a good employee to get good jobs. Now, kids are fed up with that. Kids are fed up with the system. Kids want meaning. They want purpose. They want experience. There's a reason why people, like, why do kids love concerts? Because it's like an incredible experience of connection and just like this like existential experience of like, I'm part of something bigger than myself. That's what Torah is. If you can give kids that in Torah, it's like once they start maturing, why do kids like struggle when it comes to like, I'll learn Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and Kant as opposed to Torah? It's because no one's given me access to the intellectual depth and brilliance of Torah. And I'm no longer going to be a slave to a system that I don't believe is true, as opposed to if you show them that the brilliance is there, that the depth is there, the wisdom is there. And yes, these guys, you know, are also brilliant, but there's something in the hierarchy of truth so much better. But if you can't give that over, they're not going to believe it and they're not going to take it. So Avram was told Lech Lecha. It's told, it's the subtitle of the Sefer, right? To go, but wasn't told where to go.
Right. Go for it yourself.
Go Lecha to yourself. But the journey to yourself has no destination. Mm-hmm. Why? Because number one, like if you, let's say you tried to teach a kid quantum mechanics, a 5-year-old kid, doesn't understand what you're talking about, right? Because he doesn't have the framework. It's like if you try to fill an 8-ounce cup with 1,000,000 gallons, there's no space. Yeah. So it doesn't have the framework. But if you try to tell yourself, your 10-year younger self, who you are now, what you're doing now, your 10-year younger self would have no idea what you're talking about. Now try 20 years. Be like, I'm doing that? Like I know this, like I'm married to that. Like I have a family, I have kids, like what? So what about your 20-year future self? Imagine he told you who you are now. Imagine he told you what you'd accomplish. You wouldn't have any idea how to frame or understand it. But it's also like, that is the spiritual journey to Hashem. That is the journey to the truth. It's like, most people think that Hashem's like out there in the sky. It's like the first Russian astronaut came back and they asked him like, did you see God? Right? And he's like, no. Like, what do you, it was like, right. Because what they thought that like, you know, some, you know, gray bearded guys out there in the sky. It's like, if you thought of going on the journey of life as going deeper internally, and the journey to Hashem is going deeper internally, then it changes life, because then you realize the progression of going deeper into yourself and expressing your true potential, and helping your kids, where I'm not pushing them, but I'm trying to help them go deeper in. Wow.
There's a lot of depth here. Wow. Let's, you know, just to bring it back to the, you know, the topic of self-confidence.
And in some sense, you know, I'm a classic alpha male, right? Like dominant, build a business, went to Harvard, Chicago, got smicha, built, you know, wrote bestsellers, go out and speak and make a lot of money and impact, inspire people. I'm a very, very feminine man, though. I'm also very sensitive, very emotional, very existential, very present.
I can tell through the conversation.
And when it comes to my wife's like one of the most feminine people I've ever met. And she's also very dominant, like Chicago law, brilliant, you know, my favorite person in the world, right? Very, 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 like it's the Ezer connected that goes on both sides. You know, Ezer connected for your masculine and your family within both sides of you, right? And a lot of people, they kind of, they feel like they have to either hide, reject, or compromise on the parts of them that they don't either understand, or they feel like doesn't fit into certain boxes of the way that whatever complicated societal structure they live in that compresses or suppresses the aspects of themselves that are not in line with. And that's not the MS. The MS is absolute oneness, where you account for everything. It's like the MS is hierarchy, where it's like in Torah, right? It's not like halacha or Gemara be'in or machshava or Musar or shkafa. It's not philosophy or psychology or mathematics or business or building relationships, leadership. It's everything. It's understanding the hierarchy. It's understanding how things synergize together. And that's marriage, and that's life, and that's parenting. It's also maleness and femaleness. So the real question, confidence is an equalizer. Everyone needs to believe in themselves and to fully pursue, is how do you do it in a way that completely raises up the self-esteem and value and confidence of women without doing it inappropriately. And it's not easy. Because if you, and this is like the main, and like almost every good will say, so the one key that really differentiates it is why you're doing it. So what most Gedolim will say is like, are you doing it Lishma? Right. So the natural progression, this is the fundamental challenge with confidence, is what's the difference between confidence and ego? How do you know if you're doing something? Like, how would you define that? Like, what is the fundamental difference? So confidence is the full belief in what you're doing. And confidence, Lishma, is when you're doing it for the sake of something bigger than yourself. So if someone like, and this is a male-female equivalent struggle of, if you're going to try to do anything meaningful or purposeful or great, or the spotlight's going to be on you, you're going to get attention. What's the difference between turning yourself into Avodah Zarah, where everyone's bowing down to you and serving you, versus I'm trying to reflect Hashem, I'm trying to live a life of truth, a life of purpose, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. And the differentiation in self-awareness is to really be aware within yourself of why you're doing what you're doing. And once you're doing it for the right reasons, the only question is not, should I do it, but how do I do this correctly? And when it comes to, from the beginning till the end of life of men and women, it's really that very deep, sensitive evaluation of being self-aware, of trying to become everything that you're supposed to become, and to do it in the right way. And
you're saying practically there's really no difference. It's just making sure that it's being done Lishma in the right way and I'll be Torah,
Yeah. And also like, it's the same way, like every single guy is different. Every single girl is different.
Right. Sure.
The principles, like the fundamentals are the same. The sensitivities are different, but there will be women who their sensitivities leans towards sensitivities that might be more prevalent when it comes to men. There will be men who their sensitivities will lean towards the sensitivities that you think you have to use for your daughter. Yeah. It's really understanding that each person is their own world, but also that the principles are like tap into the deeper principles of how to construct life. And then it kind of becomes like, as opposed to turning it the other way around, where like I kind of twist the system around me. So it's convenient. Listen, it's not easy. And also like everything we spoke about is not easy, but first of all, it's worth it. Second of all, it's the most amazing thing ever when you're living a meaningful, purposeful life, growing, trying to become all that you can become, helping others do the same, which is what parenting is, and then leads towards thinking about it. Because at a certain stage, every parent goes through the struggle of like, what am I doing with my life? And then you start thinking like, what have I done with my life? Then you start thinking like, I want to have an impact somehow. I want to do something with my life. Well, parenting is the quintessential fundamental starting point of that equation. Because if you want to think about impacting others, you start with yourself. Once you can do yourself, it's not then you get permission. Like they happen at the same time, but then you're like, most people are on the journey of figuring out how to impact themselves while they're parenting, but that's the expression. Then you can scale it and you can start thinking outwards and you start living a meaningful life where like everyone is a leader. The only question is to the scale and the numbers, but like by definition, every parent's a leader. You're literally leading a nation, like your small little tribe.
It's very interesting. It's interesting also what you were just saying before about like male versus female, because one of the ways, like growing up, I wasn't the most self-confident child. And I now, like through our conversation, I was thinking about it, how like one of the things that I think that made me less confident in a way was because I had certain components of me that was like, let's say, more sensitive. And that has that like, it's a little more feminine. And I think in a ways that did make me feel a little less confident sometimes, like, maybe that's not what I should be. Cause like, that's not what, that's not, people tell me like, stop being so sensitive. You're a guy, So it's interesting just to like think now, like how, like what you were saying is it's really to take all the components. It's okay for a male to have parts that are more feminine, female to have parts that are more like masculine, and to use to have the full, everything, be you, be who you are. 100%. And that's, it gives me a lot, like a deeper meaning of what you said this in the book at one point of like how, like the Michelangelo, like the, taking that clay and molding it, and really growth is when you show who you really are. And really like this whole conversation has really given me a lot more depth to what you wrote about in this book. So glad to hear it's amazing. So as we end off, any final message to parents on this specific topic of, instilling our children with self-confidence?
Well, I think that the entire conversation has been kind of based on this premise, but I'll kind of reemphasize it because there's so many different areas of life. And like confidence is probably, like, you can think of confidence as the fuel necessary to do anything. Because why do people hesitate to do anything? Or you have that inspirational stage where you're like, maybe I'll ask that person on a date. Maybe I'll write this book. Maybe I'll try to get a better job. Maybe I'll try to get a promotion. Maybe I'll start exercising. Maybe I'll start eating healthier. It's like the inspirational stage is nice and everyone has it. It's to give yourself permission to go on the journey. Parenting is not a one and done. It's a lifelong journey. And by the way, in a very deep sense, you have to parent yourself. Like, you have to help yourself actualize your own potential. And once you understand that, first of all, every principle is within every other principle. So it's not like parenting is like this own little chapter of your life. You'll see how parenting manifests in every part of your life. Once you start seeing what parenting is, you also start seeing how confidence is part of every part of life. It's giving yourself permission to, first of all, believe in the inspirational vision that you want to believe in. It's giving yourself permission to try. It's giving yourself permission to fail forward, to recognize that process is progress, and progress takes time. And it's not a win or lose, yes or no, fail or succeed. It's, and the most valuable character trait I've ever seen is effort. People who try, most people don't try because they're afraid if they try, they'll fail. And if they fail, they're a failure. So they'd rather stay in the comfort of whatever's worked.
Sure.
And to give yourself permission in your own personal life to work on all these things will give you permission to then show up as a role model to your kids as, wow, like my father, my mother, just like, it's amazing how they're just like they messed up and it was okay. And they didn't pretend they're perfect. And like, I can do that too. And they're curious and they're learning and they're thinking and they're having an interesting conversation and they're building and they're working on skills and they're trying to go on this journey of life. And it's like, first of all, why wouldn't you want to do that yourself? And then if you think of parenting as just helping another soul through this world to become all that they can become, the only way you're going to be able to do that
yourself is
if you do that yourself. Amazing. So it's a very, very, very simple two-stage process. And then you realize the abstraction of that process exists within everything. It exists within marriage, it exists within leadership, it exists within education, it exists within every form of career success, it exists within every form of Torah learning, it exists within every form. It is the very simple, it's the relation between you and Hashem. Like, Hashem is your parent because Hashem has created you just like you created a child. Hashem helps you actualize your potential just like you help your child actualize your potential. Like, these hierarchical frameworks and these parallelisms, it also just gives so much sense to all the fragmented pieces of life, where it's not like this is just focused on parenting and then you'll now focus on this and then you focus on, it's like everything connects.
Amazing.
And then you start to see, like, that's the awesomeness of Torah. It's the most brilliant awesomeness. And it's not only great wisdom. It's not only, leads to a life of happiness, it not only leads to a life of truth. It's like every value you can possibly name that you believe is important is on that spectrum within there. And like, that's life.
Yeah.
So,
wow. Incredible. Thank you so much. This was an incredibly deep conversation and I love it. This was so eye-opening for me on so many components of self-confidence and for myself as a person and also for, raising children as a parent and helping me to even delve deeper into the meaning behind a lot of what you wrote about in your book. And thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Jews Next Door. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I'd love to hear your takeaways. Reach out to us. Reach out to me at yair@genoff.org, hi@genoff.org. You can check us out on the website. You could leave a question there. We'd love to be in touch. Please be in touch. Check us out on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door. Hit me up on Twitter at Yair Menshel. And we're on TikTok now too. We have some great content, a lot of really great insights into parenting, tips, parenting pointers, reaction videos, and quotes. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of articles. You want to check it out. Check it out at genoff.org. You won't be sorry you did. And I look forward to hearing from you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it with your family and friends. Looking forward to another great episode next week.